When you're the poor person in the room, it means you're probably surrounded by emotionally and psychologically stunted wealthier people. And they probably buy into the narrative that everything that they have, they earned of their own gumption, their own integrity, and they earned it all themselves. And that the reason you don't have as much is because you're just not quite good enough. Welcome to Misfit Grit. Many of us are going to find ourselves in the room over the holidays with people that we really don't want to be around. Really judgmental, petty, self-righteous, and shallow people. And if you do not have as much finances or as much wealth as those people, it really, you feel it, don't you? You know. And those little comments that they make just to let you know that they view you as less, well, that's real. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Classism is a way that we segregate ourselves into little boxes in the society that we have, this capitalistic, extractive, and exploitive society. We have this myth in this country that if you're poor, it's because it's your own fault. And today I'm primarily going to be talking about whiter, wealthier people because that's the culture that I'm familiar with. I'm a white lady, so I've been around that a lot more, and I'm much more familiar with those little nuanced ways that wealthier white people behave and discuss things, or should I say don't discuss things often. But it sure makes you feel like a pile of crap if you don't have a good set of boundaries up and a good sense of your own self-worth that is not at all tied into the amount of money in your bank account. Poverty and inequality and the fact that people don't have access to clean water, enough food to eat, housing, proper education, oh golly, what else can we talk about here? Health insurance, right? This is a systems failure. And oftentimes people of the higher classes want to talk about it as though it's like the weather. It's nothing that they could control, when we absolutely could design different systems, and plenty of cultures have existed throughout history that don't operate in this same way. Now, human beings are shallow, petty, power hungry, and we operate under systems of patriarchy, and we have a lot of Christian ideas of wealth and prosperity gospel and stuff like that. And so if you can kind of start to sift through that, you can see how we got to where we're at. But that doesn't mean it doesn't feel uncomfortable when you have to be around these people. Maybe you're sitting around a table and your snobby sister-in-law is making some dig because you aren't able to go on the same type of vacation that she is. And she just really wants you to know that, well, maybe one day your ship will come in and you'll actually be able to have the types of things that I do. People who were born into the white middle class or the upper class, they have unearned privilege. This has gone on for a few generations now, and they have not had to question really anything. There's a very powerful and playbook out there that they just have to follow those steps. And I can remember I grew up in the middle class, and I grew up amongst people who were of much higher income than my family at the time. Since the time I left my family about 20 years ago, and I have very little contact with them, my family's income has grown, and they now they're up here with that bougie upper class, upper middle class. But when I was younger, it was very clearly spelled out for me how if I just followed A, B, C, well then I would achieve greatness because I was a white girl. Everything was going to be great, and I just had to play by the rules. I didn't do that, and I left all that. Now I live in financial poverty, However, it doesn't feel that way all the time because I have a lot of physical resources such as food, and my house is warm, and I have a ton of hands-on skills that keep us out of dire straits. I'm not saying it isn't difficult. It definitely is. We do things very differently, my husband and I here, raising our children. But we are judged very harshly by people who just don't understand. Like, why didn't you just follow the playbook? Because then you could have, like, you could be like me. It's really difficult for people with unearned privilege to wrap their head around that there's any other way that could make a person feel fulfilled, because let's be real, they don't feel fulfilled. They really don't. There's this emptiness and hollowness that's very clearly felt if you're paying attention to them. That's why they're so petty and shallow and competitive. When you're in the room with these people, you'll notice that they're always posturing. Who has more? Who did what? Who has the best vacation? Who has the newest kitchen remodel? Or if you're a man, what truck did you get? What new four-wheeler? Right? There's always, like, if you listen, they're just competing, and it's never enough because they themselves don't feel like it's enough. So if you find yourself in financial poverty for whatever reason, or if you don't fit that little box perfectly, you reject it somehow, you're a bit of a misfit, that makes them feel very uncomfortable, because it's an invitation for them to examine not only their own privilege, their lifestyle, the thoughts that they have, but on a larger scale of our society. It's much easier to just follow into the narrative that, well, you're poor because you're dumb, and you're dumb because you're poor. I don't know what came first. It's like a chicken or an egg, right? So it's really hard. And I left my local resistance movement in 2025 because it was just full of bougie, wealthy people, all associated with our local university, Michigan Tech. I was really the only working class person showing up, or my husband when he came too. We were the only ones, and the leadership was very uncomfortable with that, we felt. Because we have this hands-on experience of like, yeah, we actually do receive those benefits. We are getting Medicaid and food stamps, and we do have to budget our money in a way that wealthier people don't have to worry about. They have to worry about, can they get a new mountain bike? How are they going to get that next vacation? That Airbnb, that price went up way too much this year, and it's really hard. Or like the Botox, I can't believe how much that costs now. Like, those aren't real problems. Those aren't real issues at all. Real issues exist for people. Which bill am I going to pay this month? How am I going to make sure my kids have snow boots? Right? Actual real things. How am I going to get to the doctor? Things like that. So I left my local resistance movement because I approached the leadership and I said, I'd really like to talk about how we can get more working class people involved in this. And do you know what he said? Nothing. He actually walked away from me. He was so uncomfortable and not able to mask his discomfort in the thought of bringing in people, tradespeople, skilled people that work with their hands, that don't have advanced degrees, that wouldn't necessarily adhere to his specific power dynamic, that he walked away from me. So I don't go back to any of that stuff anymore. I don't go anywhere near it. I realized it was just a bunch of liberals just rubbing elbows and judging others for not having as much as they do. And then the guilt that they're not able to process properly, especially for the liberals. This is really true for the left. They don't process that guilt well, and so it gets projected or it gets repressed into very bizarre ways. And if you're around that, you can feel it. You're like, oh, something's really wonky here. And that's what it is. Another issue that we come into contact with frequently is when our children's friends, their parents, see what our house looks like. Now, we have an old mining house from the late 1800s. I don't know exactly when it was built. And the outside of it is covered in this type of cardboard style siding that was popular in the 1950s. It's called Hemosote, I believe. And ours is crumbling. Our place was in total disrepair when we bought it 5 years ago. We bought it for 40 grand cash. We own our house outright, and we have done tremendous work to it ourselves. We have put roofs on, we have put drain fields in, we have a brand new deck on the front. We have painted and sanded and put in gardens and infrastructure for feeding our family. We have reclaimed buildings, right? We have done a ton of work. We put this wood stove in, some of which we paid for skilled tradespeople to come in and do this stuff too. But a lot of it we did ourselves. Like, I found out I was pregnant when I was roofing because I looked down and I thought, oh golly, I'm quite nauseous right now. And I knew I was pregnant with my 4th child. So this is what I do with my time. And the wealthier people don't see that at all. They don't see how hard we work. They don't see how well my family is fed, how much time and effort I put into caring for my family as a radical homemaker. All they see is crumbling siding and that we must not be financially well off enough to put the siding on. And we look poor. They see that our vehicles come out of junkyards. We don't have any payments on things because we live within our means. That is not seen as an asset in our culture. In fact, our culture sees that going into debt for things like vacations and the types of clothing and the types of procedures that you want, traveling, whatever, that's perfectly normal because you have to constantly keep up with the Joneses, right? You have to always be competing. And it's totally normalized. And my husband and I reject that. And we have very, very, very little debt. And in fact, the only reason we do have debt is because we needed to build credit. We actually didn't have any. And we are thinking of buying more property for our children in the future. So we have to play the game somehow. And we do have a small amount. But by and large, we own absolutely everything ourselves. But that is not seen as a good quality in 2025 consumerist, overconsumptive, capitalistic, superficial America. That's seen as a liability. And why is that? Well, because then I might judge them and then they might have to feel uncomfortable. And that's like totally not okay because feeling uncomfortable for the wealthier classes is like, it's like basically death. So when you're the poor person in the room or the person who rejects these consumptive systems and all this garbage out there that has gotten our society in such a mess, know that you're not alone. There are other people out there, few and far between, but we reject that. And we don't have to let their petty little comments or their disrespect for us or just blatant ignoring of us, we don't have to let that get to us. Understanding that these are largely, especially if they're white, people who did not earn an ounce of their privilege. They were told what steps to follow. They showed up at the right time. They were born at the right time in the right place, and they just followed the steps. And here they are. And they're arrogant and entitled enough and underdeveloped enough to think that that's the end of the story, right? That's just it. But if you're watching this, then you probably understand that it goes a lot deeper and there's a lot more that goes into classism and the structures of society that we live in. And it might not always be appropriate to speak up and say something, especially if you're the only one in the room, because you know, if you're anything like me, you'll find yourself alienated very quickly and not always the best strategy. But just knowing that truth in yourself and holding it, having someone you can talk to about it, however you can let that out, going and having a good scream after if you need to, after dealing with these people. If that's what you got to do, then do it. Because I know, just like so many of you know, that dealing with them is soul crushing. And I think that that's largely because a lot of them don't really have a lot going on in their soul. It's very hollow and empty, and they rely on consuming their identity, buying into that identity, just so afraid of being rejected by the herd, and they really can't do a whole lot on their own. They don't have a lot of grit, right? And they're terrified of being misfits. So clearly, people like you and I are not going to fit in very well. And take care of yourselves, and avoid it if you can. You really aren't obligated to spend time with people who don't want to see you as a whole human being, regardless of how much money is in your bank account. And people who don't want to examine the systems, examine the wealth, and talk about how we can make a better society for everyone. Well, I don't want to be around those people anyways. They're a bunch of jerks. Happy holidays, everyone. Hope you're warm and cozy. Thanks for watching.